Welcome to the Fall into Grace podcast, where we explore the grace of Christ in everyday life. I'm Taylor.
And I'm Lindsey.
And we welcome you to dive in with us on faith, scripture, culture, relationships, and everything in between. Welcome to Fall into Grace.
Well, welcome everyone. Welcome back to the Fall into Grace podcast, where we talk about the grace of Christ in everyday life. I'm Lindsey, and this is Taylor, if we haven't met yet. And today we're talking about one of our favorite topics, feminism. But first off, we just want to do our sponsor shout out. This episode is brought to you by the Fall into Grace Bible Study Guide. So you can get the Fall into Grace Bible Study Guide by joining our newsletter, and you'll get a bunch of tips and tools for reading the Bible, whether you've been reading for a long time or if you're just starting out, especially if you're just starting out. But yeah, how about Taylor, start us off. Tell us about feminism and what you think about it.
Well, this is probably one of my favorites that we've written and discussed. But so, ladies, you don't need feminism. And why, you might ask? Well, for one, feminism in modern day culture isn't really helping women at all. The modern day feminist is insisting that men and women are the same, but we know from the Bible that that is simply not true. In Genesis, woman was created from man as an equal companion. We are meant to complement each other. We as women are not supposed to do everything a man can do, and vice versa.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's interesting. So, I mean, this is what we've talked about before, is the fact that we want to be the same in feminism, in a feminist lens. We want to be the same as a man in every way. We want to be strong.
Yep.
We don't want to be perceived as weak, but is that necessarily a bad thing if we don't have the same physical strength, or where's the hang up, do you think?
Yeah, and I think kind of the caveat is just because you're the, quote, weaker sex, that doesn't necessarily make you a weak person.
Yeah, absolutely.
If that makes sense too. So, I mean, I think, you can still be a strong woman without having to put down men and insist that women over men and that kind of thing. You can still be a strong woman and at the same time still love your husband or, love your sons, anything, and still treat men as they should be treated.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you think, the way that we treat men as a society these days, do you think it's how God intended, considering that God, that men are made in the image of God, just like we are, I think sometimes we kind of go off the rails when we think that women are kind of better or morally better, but sometimes I feel like we treat men like they're morally inferior just because of this stigma of feminism.
Yeah. No, and the funny thing is we are all equally sinful as men and women. Women are just as depraved as men are, and I guess if you want to say vice versa, but it doesn't matter. God intended that we're all made in the image of God. And yes, I guess you can say men, how do I want to say it? How in the Bible it does say that women to submit to your husband. Okay, but that doesn't necessarily mean that man looks down on women, though.
Yeah, for sure. Because if you look at the equal command to the man, it was actually a higher calling because I think it was Paul who was saying, so wives, submit to your husbands, and but in the same breath, it's the husband is to lay down his life. The husband is to treat his wife like Christ treated the church, and Christ died for the church. We don't have that same calling.
Yeah, and I feel like feminists, when they want to criticize the Bible, they always forget that part.
Yeah.
Just want to see that wives submit to your husband's part. When it's well, hey, you didn't finish, which kind of goes back to our stuff about you have to read the entire context.
Yeah, for sure.
So you can't just pick out the one part that fits your little narrative. But no, so men and women are supposed to be different. Okay, so yes, men may be the stronger of the two sexes, but we bear children. Men will never know what it's like to carry a child in your womb, which I think in some ways, a slightly unpopular opinion, I guess, but if you two have a child together, yes, of course you both love this child, but there is just something so different on the woman's side that I think, like, men, we love you, but you will never understand. Like, there is something that says, like, when you carry a child in you, that it's just like, I mean, it's
at the biological level. Yeah, for sure. And I think I've read something about what the female brain goes through when she's creating a child, and the different neural pathways that are formed, and that comes just by nature. And then for men to experience that same type of bonding, it takes time and intentionality.
Yes, exactly. Where a woman, it's like, it's from literally the first moment that your baby is born, it's there. So
exactly.
And like, that's a good thing. Like, I don't understand why why would you want to be the same as a man? We love men, but of course, but being different is good.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's something that where feminism does disservice to women. I mean, I know we'll talk about how feminism does disservice to men and our, how we relate to them, but it does a disservice to women, because by saying, okay, you're supposed to be the same in every way as a man, then, I mean, subconsciously, then we're removing everything that makes us special as women. And then we're also trying to fit into the same mold as men, like in a career sense. Of course, women can and should have really thriving careers, but it shouldn't be a bad thing to want to stay home with your kids, and that's your main aspiration,
especially when everything that you're doing is to glorify God anyways. And I mean, yes, I'm saying this as a stay-at-home parent, but what's more glorifying than raising the next generation?
Absolutely.
Even if it's something as simple as making sure they eat chicken nuggets.
and broccoli stuffed in their grilled cheese.
Occasionally. Totally.
Right.
But I mean, on kind of, going back to that though, there was a time when we did need feminism to an extent. Like, women weren't allowed to vote. Women were expected to stay home, and that was the only option.
Right.
Or I guess if you even want to say women weren't, birth control wasn't a thing yet. So all those things that, of course, feminism has fought for that. And those are all really good things. I think you might want to, people call them like the classical feminists or the first wave, that kind of thing, where now I'm still confused. Like, what right do I not have?
Yeah. And I think it's gotten to such an extreme to where it's like we're fighting. So since we don't know what exactly we're fighting for, it's this nebulous thing that just the borders keep changing. So when it came to, women's suffrage, okay, we got that. That's very tangible. That's a very concrete equality to have. And, but when it comes to like this intangible, like, well, women should be able to advance as far as in their careers, even though they took so much time to, like, 5 years off to be a stay-at-home parent. Well, I mean, no, that's a choice you made. And, that's like, why should we have equality there when a man's been working, or not even a man, say a woman without children has been working that equal amount of time, while you were raising your kids. I think it just kind of, like, when we don't know what we're fighting about, it almost creates this empty angst that can never be satisfied because there's no actual target. And then so we get super duper extreme, like with like now it's women have to be able to be sexual and feminist, and women have to be able to exploit their own bodies and still be respected. Or women just like the Me Too movement, like just accusing a man of sexual misconduct, whether it was true or not, like, we have to believe the woman. I mean, that is extremely toxic and has destroyed a lot of lives.
Oh no, totally. And I think that's a great example. And I think I was going to carry off on that, was kind of like it's also just like created the breeding grounds for these things to happen. So like by making everything man's fault, like you said, especially it seems to be a really big thing with like college, campuses, where, okay, so you guys, I'm not saying this is a good thing, but it does happen where you all are at a party and then, at the time it was consensual and then you regret your decision, or not you, but girls regret the decision and then accuse the boy of sexual assault. And it's like, see, in an era where feminism wasn't taking over everything, that wouldn't really be allowed. And that's what I mean. It's creating this breeding ground where everything that women do, we're in the right. There's no other way for anything to go about.
Right. Well, and even I think you told me about this, Jen Hatmaker's opinion on women is essentially that women are more like morally superior, and she's really popular, and this is in the Christian sphere. She's a really popular Christian author too.
Yeah, using that term loosely.
Yeah, right.
No, and then I think a lot of women, they only see it from the woman's side of view too. And so like the instances of on college campus, the sexual assault, well, what if that was your son? You know, like I couldn't imagine.
No, and especially after you've gone to such lengths to raise your son in an honorable way, and you know, I mean, there have been so many men who, like young men who've been accused of something, and even if they were acquitted, that stain was already on, like they've already had opportunities pass them by, and then like, I mean, can you imagine having that taken away from you over something that was completely untrue?
Yeah, exactly. And like, I think the fact that and then when they want to put men on a sex offender list for a time that he got too drunk in college, you know, and now that they're ruined the rest of their life over this whole Me Too. Now, on the other hand, I think Me Too, like, I feel like it started with good intentions. Like, I do think, like, in the workplace, there is totally, you know, sexual harassment or women not being able to move up because they didn't sleep with the boss or, you know, whoever. Like, I totally get that. And I feel like it should have stuck with things like that, like actual tangible and, you know, situations, and like, you know, with evidence that this happened. So like, let's just say that happened at the workplace and a woman kept reporting it and then nothing happened. I think that's a perfect example of what Me Too should have really covered. Not
absolutely
18-year-old boys having sex with their 17-year-old girlfriend and then now she claims rape and now his life is ruined, you know, like that kind of stuff. Like, and it, or movie stars that didn't necessarily, now the Harvey Weinstein, that's different, but I mean, just like random, everybody getting accused of sexual assault is ridiculous.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially I've noticed recently with some of the Hollywood stuff that's come out recently, there are people who were industry allies, you know, who had been working with those people forever, and just because they don't want to have a bad public perception, even before anything was proven true, they're just like, oh, I'm not associating with them anymore.
Yeah.
And that's like a really shameful thing. Like, you know, I mean, I'm sure it happens a lot more than we care to admit, but at the same time, I don't think it happens as much. I mean, you know, there's a lot of false narratives out there for sure.
Yes. No, totally. And I always use this example because I think it actually works perfectly, but I think like this feminist ideology is like all, like they act like this is an episode of SVU, where it's always like the super rich, like preparatory school kid that has been given everything he's wanted since day one. So he's, you know, really rude to girls and is probably actually a rapist because he thinks he has all this power. Like, I don't understand that concept. Like, as far as, okay, great, it makes great TV, but this is not actual real life. I mean, maybe in a case here and there, sure, I'll give them that. But like when they make it out to be that men are just looking everywhere to rape some girl is completely asinine.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Oh, and then like that Gillette ad that came out, I think, gosh, that's probably a year or two ago. That was all about like men, we need to be better. And it was all a bunch of like men harassing women. And I mean, it's just like I've been around enough men in my life. It is not like that at all. Right.
Well, and you and I know we've worked in warehouses a lot, you know, as one of like the very few women who've worked there. And it's just, it's not as commonplace as you would think.
And more often they're trying to be funny than like actual harassment. So,
right. Yeah.
I mean, not that it's good. It's definitely not professional, but it's kind of like in the warehousing world, it's like, whatever, you know?
Yeah. But, not predatory.
Yeah, exactly. It's not predatory at all. So, but I mean, so women want to play the victim, but at the same time, we as women are a lot of times given more opportunities.
That's true. Yeah. I mean, we want to that's the thing, is like we want to keep, and that's the thing, I think with human nature, period, unless we've committed to this, the notion of personal responsibility, I think we naturally gravitate towards anything where we could play the victim and get some sort of
Oh
favor.
yeah, totally. Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's become something, I mean, that's something that's become attractive about feminism in general, because but you know, I think more women are going to college and graduating from college now than men. There are certain workplaces now. I mean, this is something I was told about academia when I was thinking about being a professor, is that I had a forward edge because I was a woman trying to be applied to be a professor. And so, I mean, there are workplaces where being a female could be, you know, an advantage just from
Yeah.
wanting
And how many, I mean, think about how many female doctors there are now. I mean, it's,
yeah.
I personally only want to go to female doctors, so I'm glad that feminism has brought that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, and how many, I mean, just think about women bosses that are out there, even in the business world, how many women have run Fortune 500 companies. It's not, I mean, and even just now we are, a Supreme Court justice is a woman that was just nominated. So, I mean, it's, women are everywhere now. It's not, I don't really know how you can claim that women are oppressed when there's women literally in the highest positions.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I think one of the most toxic aspects of feminism is how it taints our interactions with men, and just like, because it's become a thing of like the battle of the sexes, you know what I mean? It's like we're not complementarians anymore because we're fighting for the same place. And it's not even, I don't even perceive it as men fighting for it. I think, you know, it's just like women are like, because we still have this nebulous idea that there's all of this oppression still, it's like it's tainted our, well, feminism has tainted, you know, female interactions with men, to where like if you're a feminist, you might naturally believe like, you know, a man is morally bad, or a man, if they're not bad, they're dumb, or I mean, it's, and that easily is going to start tainting how you talk to men, how you, and actually how you find a partner too.
Yes.
Which
totally.
is really toxic.
Yeah, like, so those male feminists out there.
Yeah. Yeah.
But talk to us about your experience with being a feminist.
Oh yeah, I mean, because I was a feminist for quite a while. I never, part of it was like pretty prevalent in school, you know, to be super feminist. And I was just, I mean, it's like at anything else in school. If everyone is talking about it, then it must be true. If teachers are teaching it, then so I didn't realize, and this is what's really dangerous about feminism, is that I didn't realize that how much I had been internalizing through that whole, the feminist rhetoric, that men were either bad or they were dumb. And so it was like this internal thing where I had to combat men in authority, and or I was just naturally suspicious of men, period. And it was a weird thing, because God really did a work on my heart, because it's funny, because I was working at a teriyaki restaurant, and so I spoke, you know, I speak Spanish and English, obviously, and the girls who worked there mostly spoke Chinese, and the guys who worked there spoke Spanish. And so it was like, I don't know how it all started, but somehow God kind of got a hold of my heart and was like, you know, basically, essentially, men are not like any worse. Like, they're not just like bad, like they're not any worse than women are. And like, and not only that, but it was like he started showing me like men go through the same struggles that women do, like, you know, because I had just such a callous perspective of what men were, you know, they were cheaters, or they were like they were just or they were aggressors, or, you know, they were just, you know, bad period or whatever. And so it was like working with my coworkers there just really opened my eyes to just see, you know, that men went through generally the same thing. And it was a conscious effort to let those thoughts go, that like, you know, that because they're a man this and because they're a man that. And it's like the scripture that says that tells us to take every thought captive and to submit it to the authority of Christ. And sometimes when God exposes something like that in our hearts, it's very much like seeing your thoughts, like being mindful of the thoughts that are coming. Well, I mean, we think it's coming into our head, but it comes out of our heart because that's what we believe. And just being like, and you actually have to challenge them and be like, is that actually true? I know I've been believing it for a long time, but is that actually true? And it really, really helped me have like more of a love and a respect for just men in general, instead of just being like thinking that they were out to get me, because I mean, I truly believe that. And it's very much a burden, a tough burden to live under. And I think, like, how do we carry that into our marriages? What if we carry that into our marriage?
Well, and then that's like kind of the thing. Like, I think women a lot of times want to say that, oh, it's always the husband that's an abuser, which, okay, of course, there's plenty of instances of domestic violence where it's the man against the woman. Absolutely. But I think that the other, like, one that isn't talked about is, like, a lot of times these ultra feminist women, they find men that are, quieter or, whatever. And then they're the aggressor. And okay, it might not be physical, but it's definitely mental. They're, constantly putting them down or telling them how awful they are, or whatever. So, I mean, it can really go both ways. And I think that how you say, like, you eventually learned that men, go through the same problems as women. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, the same, like, fears and the same.
Right. Yeah.
Like, yes, we say men and women are different. Yes. But at the same time, we're all kind of like fighting for the same thing.
Right.
So,
yeah. And it's like, and can you imagine like think about being tainted by feminism, being suspicious of men in general, or just think we've talked about, thinking men are dumb, like he won't understand because he's a man, and or just like constantly nitpicking at things, like in things that are just really innocent differences of understanding things, like really innocent differences, but instead of like trying to find an understanding, we just dismiss it as like, oh, he's just a man, he's not going to get it.
Right. No, and it's like there's just like, well, and it's some things I can say that about men, as far as, because I have, well, my son's small, so it's not there yet, but a husband and 2 other stepsons, where there are just things that like men just don't think about.
Yeah.
So, I mean, where women, I think on a whole, we're probably more meticulous. So like every woman out there that has husbands and sons knows toilet seats, like it just doesn't occur to men to put it down,
right.
Where women like point out that kind of stuff, or right. Sometimes if you ask a boy when they did something goofy, you're like, why did you do that? And they're like, I don't know. They literally don't know. Like, it's just, I mean, so, but that's okay though. And especially with like teenagers, like they really don't know, they just kind of do things, but that's okay. And I feel like feminism has like captured like some of the funny, goofy things that men do and made it bad.
Yeah. And I think talking about kids, so like the interesting about how feminism has shaped our entertainment industry, but especially how kids' films are, is that we see so many more young empowered girls or empowered women, and like you were saying, the men aren't shed the same light in a lot of hero figures anymore.
Yeah, so it's either they're the bad guy or they're really dumb, like we've said a few times now. So like I think probably one of the biggest examples right now would be Star Wars.
Yeah.
Rey, obviously, and I don't get me wrong, like I liked the first of the new Star Wars movies, so I mean, I don't necessarily always think that like a female lead's a bad thing, obviously, but I feel like it's the intent that always, the woman is the hero, and then like in Star Wars, okay, then Kylo Ren, the evil man,
right?
Or they're really dumb, like Finn's character, where they're just kind of like goofy and whatever. So it's kind of like, but she's the smart one. She knows how to fix every ship and airplane and knows how to use the force and all of that. But then all the guys are just evil or dunderheads.
Yeah. And for us, I mean, it's something I didn't really even notice until I think Jason pointed it out to me, or someone else pointed it out to me. And then, but imagine if you're a kid and this is shaping, like, I mean, this is shaping your worldview,
Mm-hmm. I mean, and so like, and also a lot of shows, I guess a good example, like, I don't know if you watched it, but back in the day, Modern Family was a big deal, the comedy show. Don't get me wrong, the show was funny, but like the dad in it, he was just kind of dumb, which it made good comedy, but at the same time, like, okay, it's portraying that all these men are just kind of like goofy and don't know what's going on with anything. And I actually read a column a while back ago written by Phil Robertson, who was from Duck Dynasty. And he said, like, he was talking about when Duck Dynasty was popular, he's like, why did everybody think that our goofy, slightly dysfunctional family was so, such a big deal? And it was because, yes, of course, they were dysfunctional like every family is, but at the same time, they were all really loving. And it wasn't, the wife wasn't super condescending, the husband wasn't dumb. Like, it was something that everybody could relate to.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that's something that's been like destroyed with feminism, that the woman always has to be the one that knows what's going on, okay, I mean, if you run a household, in some ways there are some like accurate points of that, like, but at the same time, but that doesn't mean that your husband doesn't know anything.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it's like, by contrast, we have, things like, we just started watching some local antenna channels, and there's the Andy Griffith show, and that's about, that's focused on being a good dad. And I'm trying to think of another example of how shows used to be, but it's well,
you can use the opposite. And in the 70s, there was All in the Family, where the wife was like a total idiot. Like,
yeah, that's true.
So we've come a long way since then.
Yeah, absolutely.
So why can't we have shows where, like, okay, like I said, I'm even fine with a female hero in some cases, but it doesn't need to be like, okay, but all the men are clearly the evil ones.
Right. Yeah, we don't have to make a caricature of men. And I think this is something that's been criticized, with interracial relations, making characters of any one particular race has been, we know that it's bad because of how it affects public opinion. And the thing is, it's feminism's as like in its attack of men, obviously not the first iteration, not the equality piece, not whatever, but like in its attack of men, and always like we in our it's almost like a bloodlust, like we need more, feminism always needs more, always demands more. And in its attack of men, it's attacking the nuclear family, because if a dad is like just going to be either stupid or bad or not there, then he's not filling the role that God intended him as a father,
Yeah, totally. And I think it's kind of in which there's a lot of studies showing like fatherless homes all around. So no matter what socioeconomic group or race you are, that fatherless homes contributes to more problems.
Yeah.
So I think, but yet we want to glorify, like, I'm a woman, I can do it all by myself, I can raise this baby myself. And like with more science advances, there's more ways a woman can have a baby without having a partner.
Right.
And okay, sure, like, of course, props to all the single moms doing it out there, don't get me wrong. Absolutely. But at the same time, like, it's not about putting down the nuclear family though. Like,
right. Yeah. And I think
that God intended it to be a man, a woman raising children.
Yeah, absolutely. And being united. And I think that's a big thing too, is because it's not, I don't think that necessarily women are trying to have single family or, I don't think they're trying to be single moms, like just because they're feminists. But how I think it manifests is like, either dismissing the dad as any authority figure in the home. That corrodes the nuclear family. Having constant arguments, not being united in parenting, and then eventually like divorce, because I know divorce is a two-way street and stuff, but we glorify so much as women our happiness over the well-being of anyone else,
Yeah, totally. And then a lot of times what leads to divorce, especially, I guess, like you said, it's a two-way street, but at least I can't speak for a man, but at least on the woman's side, that and you definitely see it really bad in mom blogs. I know I put down mom blogs a lot, but a lot of them are really not helpful. But it's kind of a like, well, you were somebody before you became a mother. So they kind of look at like motherhood as just something that happened to you.
Almost like a person.
Yeah, exactly. Rather than like, but I look at myself as a mother, but it is who I am,
Yeah.
Like, that is my identity kind of, and I like that's my identity. So a lot of times what contributes to divorce is women after they have kids, well, I need to be my old self again. If you're anything like me, your old self was nothing to brag about. So I don't really understand that concept anyways.
Right.
But But that being said, like, I think this focus is like, instead of like contributing everything as the family, it's like, well, what about me?
Right. Yeah. It's what about me? And I've seen, and that's a great point, because it's not it at that point, it's not always just about, how the parents are together, how the man's treat, or how the woman and men are relating, how the spouses are relating, but how kids treat their kid, or how women treat their kids is huge. I
Oh,
mean, I've seen
absolutely. Oh, I
so
could
many
go.
kids wrecked by moms who were just all about themselves.
Yeah, totally. And it shows too. I mean, not so much it maybe when they're little, it could be, I mean, some behavioral problems, but I mean, definitely when they're older, and then how they even view themselves too, because they were always worried about their mom, or the mom was already worried about herself. So I mean, totally.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Oh, go
yeah.
ahead.
Oh no. Well, what was I going to say? So, well, I mean, oh, it was about the whole thing about how it kind of permeates in the Christian world. I don't know if this is a feminist thing, or if this is just a thing that we deal with as women, but like, one of the biggest things that really, really bothers me is that it's commonly acceptable to be at a women's only gathering and totally just start venting about husbands. I'm like, okay, that's
Oh,
not what the space is for.
no, I mean, like, I think there's, well, let me take that back for a second. I think there's a time and a place to talk about maybe a struggle that you're having. Now,
Sure.
I think most struggles should stay within the marriage, most. But
Mhm.
hey, if there's, I've told you a few things like, hey, so this is happening, when it's like small things, and I would say you choose somebody that is, not going to fully take your side, and also not put down your husband, but yet still be fair about the situation.
Right. Yeah.
I think that's different than straight up just venting. I almost said it.
Yeah, for sure.
But it is, and I feel like now, if you want to have a women's group where you do maybe talk about some of the struggles like of motherhood, but in a positive light, as far as like, hey, what did you do? I'm like, I did it on Facebook a few weeks ago, like, hey, what did everybody do to get their kid to eat vegetables?
Yeah.
Like things like that, not like, how do I control my demon spawns? Like things like that's.
So do you get enough me time as a mom?
Yeah, and like me time, and like I feel like I think you and I have very different views on what me time is. Me time is like, I went to Target by myself, like, not, hey, I went
Not a girls' weekend.
Like, yeah, and I just think that in a life, and I know I slam social media a lot, but I think social media really adds to that. And I think because now, especially since the pandemic, it's gotten really bad, but the whole like, I need to drink wine because my kids are so awful, they're not in school. And I'm like, okay, well, first of all, if you never parent, and I know I'm saying this as a first-time parent, but I'm also not an idiot, and I can see
Right.
things, but if you didn't parent your kids from the get-go, you wouldn't really be having this problem, but you probably never paid attention to the first place. And I know parenting can be challenging. I totally get it. But at the same time, is you going on social media telling people how awful your kids are helping? No, it's not. And especially because they don't see it, to me, it's bullying.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
And I think a lot of ways, like, feminism has, like, instead of like being thankful for the things that we do have, it's like really created some ugly breeding grounds for like just plain complaining.
Yeah, absolutely. And
like, you don't need this, girl. You tell him what to do. Your husband needs to do this. Your kids aren't, they're taking away from yourself, whatever it is. Like, it's just, it's not helpful.
And then you take something that was, like you said, it was something that was supposed to stay in the family. I mean, of course, when problems are too big for us to deal with on ourselves, we go to someone who's going to help us reconcile, not someone who's going to drive us farther apart.
Yeah, totally. So don't go to your single friend,
Yeah, exactly. You want to go to someone who's experienced, like someone who's maybe been married for a while, a pastor, like a good mentor.
Absolutely.
Whatever. But yeah, like when, but you're taking something that's sacred, and it's within the sacred confines of your marriage or your family or whatever, and you're allowing people to give their opinion without, one, knowing the whole story, and two, oftentimes people go to people who just want to give them validation. Then they feel like they're right, and then they take all of that rightness back to their family instead of maybe dealing with something that internally is actually their issue.
Yeah, and so actually we can probably put this in some like episode notes or something, but a great podcast that I listened to before, and I think I even recommended it to you, Lindsay, was Brian Buffini, his podcast with his wife Bev.
Yes.
I love all of those because like I think I like cry every time I listen to one of them because they're so positive. I mean, granted, I know things are a little bit different in his life because he's a multimillionaire, but at the same time, they weren't always. And like he said, he's made some really bad business decisions, and you know, she's always been there, or in the fact that they're in an interracial marriage, you know, that I don't want to say like puts a strain per se because they don't seem like they let it, but I mean, it's still difference in opinions.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, their number one focus is always God is the center of everything. And I think that's like what sets them apart from everybody else that you can, you know, maybe listen to on some marriage advice, unless it's a Christian based one, obviously. But I like that they have a lot of like real world examples in theirs. Yeah. And they always talk about that their faith is the number one thing.
Yeah, which is huge. I remember they were talking about that bad business decision he made.
Yes.
His wife, Bev, said, you know, I really don't think this is the right thing. Like, I think that you're putting at too much risk. I don't think it's going to pan out how you think it will. But he did it, and she supported him or whatever, and it totally fell through, and I think they had to go bankrupt or something like that.
Yeah, something like that, yeah. And then their house burnt down one time, and I mean, even if you're a multimillionaire or not, that's still no easy task, because like he said, he's like, we have 6 kids under 10 or something when it happened. So he says, we literally lost everything. So, I mean, think about it. Again, even if you're a multimillionaire, you're like, I have to start from scratch. I can get a car, a new house. I mean, just basic clothes, you know, I mean, everything. That's still a lot. And that's still something that's straining on a marriage. And the fact that they came through with it is awesome. And so that's why they're kind of like one of my favorites to kind of listen to about marriage and life. And not to mention, Bev homeschooled all of their kids. They have, I think, 6 kids, and they're all amazing. So I think she's a total bad, you know what.
Totally. Well, and you look at their kids, and they're, I mean, you know, we've seen, I mean, just as an example, their kids are all about, at least the ones we've seen, you know, in social media, because I follow Anna Buffini on. Yeah, and she's all about personal responsibility, discipline, working hard. And how often do you see that in a multimillionaire family?
Yeah, totally. Exactly. So the fact that there's somebody out there that's, you know, wealthy and I guess a position of power, he's a business owner, but still like has the same grassroots as, you know, what you and I could have, that faith is first, family, everything.
Yeah.
So there's no feminist messages there.
No, and I guess it just goes to show again how important the nuclear family is, not just on a sociological level, but how important it is to God to have unity in your home and to stick together.
Oh, absolutely. So yeah, I mean, men and women, we are different, but we are equals in that aspect. And so women treat your husbands like that, and husbands treat your wives like that. Like, it doesn't need to be a fight. And like the point that you brought up yesterday when we were kind of writing some of this was, God doesn't like that kind of strife. Like, so by creating the men versus women, that doesn't make God happy. That doesn't glorify him.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I think in Proverbs, it says one of the things that God hates is something, it's either strife or division, but same thing. It's like, you know, causing that division between each other is not something he likes. Yeah.
And then I guess something that's probably like near and dear to me, but I think feminism also too, well, I don't think, it definitely does. It glorifies abortion, which obviously us as Christians, life begins in the womb, and feminism has totally taken that to some crazy extent that a baby's just going to get in your way. You can't do any of this. Yeah. So obviously you have to kill it.
Yeah, well, okay. And there's so many things wrong with that. Like, okay, so for one, a child is a gift, you know, whether you believe if, you know, a baby in the womb is a real person or not. Right. That child is going to be a gift no matter what. But then there's like you're saying, you came across some verses that really confirm how a child is a life, a baby.
Yeah, I didn't realize how many there were. Probably the biggest one that I did was from Jeremiah 1:5. Wow. And it says, yeah, before I formed you in your mother's body, I chose you. Before you were born, I set you apart to serve me. So like that, I mean, it doesn't get any clearer than that, guys.
Yeah, I mean,
but yeah, and it's just like, I think feminism has created this thing that you're only fulfilled if you have this super big career, and no, you can't have a family. A baby is just going to get in the way of that. And I feel like, first of all, what kind of depraved person you have to be to think that a baby is just going to get in the way? Like, I mean, of course, like, it doesn't throw a major monkey wrench perhaps in your plans. Absolutely. But there's so many things I could say about that. But with abortion, it's just like, okay, in what other sense do we say, just kill them?
Yeah, exactly. Well, and gosh, like, what a horrendous thing to say. And not to mention, I mean, you were the one who had sex. Having sex is not your right. It's a reproductive act that you're choosing to have, whether you're protected or not.
And yeah, and the thing with where feminism kind of comes into that is they think because a man can walk away, a woman should be able to. When it's like, okay, I guess technically a man can walk away, but it takes two to tango. You can't, just reproduce out of thin air. So you are still responsible for that action. And there's a million resources out there that you don't, that are either you can put your baby up for adoption, or there's a million resources that can help you raise your child. You don't need to choose that route. And I'm so sick of hearing Christians are just pro-birth, they're not pro-life, when every charity there is a Christian-run organization. So, and adoptions agencies are generally Christian-run. It's insane.
And the thing is, like, when I hear that, like, okay, you're just pro-birth, not pro-life, and what I think is, okay, so being poor is not an existence.
Yeah, exactly. And so, or like, back when I used to have an awful thing called Twitter, I saw somebody say like, I wish my mother had aborted me. I had so much, wrong go in my childhood. Like, okay, but you're here as an adult. Like, I think, yes, there are people that have had unimaginable things happen to them as a child, absolutely. But so you'd rather be dead?
Yeah, and that's like, how do you really
death is better than being poor? I mean, anything anymore is, especially here in America, you have every opportunity now. Some might, be farther ahead than others, obviously, but if you were born poor, you can get out of poverty.
Absolutely. And I mean, I was listening to Candace Owens talk about this a couple weeks ago. Like, human beings thrive in adversity, and that's super clear in the scripture. I mean, we're all talking from, right now, when we talk about abortion, we're so used to arguing from a secular worldview, but now there are so many Christians that are on board with abortion that now we really need to argue from the God factor. Like, one, okay, so God doesn't have a plan for that baby. Of course he does. And then two, like, God has a plan for you. We have,
yes, absolutely.
And even if a man skips out on his responsibility, God sees, and he's a just God. Things aren't always gonna work out in our favor, but if we covet other people's privilege, then we're going to miss the point of the gospel.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. Yeah. And I think that so for a woman that maybe has an unexpected pregnancy, there is a plan for you. And there's so many things out there for you that you don't need to kill your baby. And not to mention how many women regret the decision afterwards, or are never happy again because they know what they did. They might, try to justify it as much as they want, but in the end,
it's a bad thing.
And of course, God's here. So if that, if you're somebody like that right now, it's okay. Like, there is help for you, that, repent now and maybe see.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is like, Christ on the cross paid for it all. So if you've had an abortion, like you're saying, if you've had an abortion, like, it's a simple turning back to God, and your sins are forgiven. It's not like just because you had an abortion doesn't mean that you have to run from God the rest of your life. It doesn't mean that you don't,
Yes, absolutely.
You don't deserve good things in your life. It doesn't mean that you can't have a family, you know. I mean, just be a mouthpiece for what abortion is and what it did to you, and what you wish you would have done differently, because I think we need more people to vocalize that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're hearing too much of the side of the people that are the shout your abortion people, where they're saying they're trying to normalize it, which I'm like, okay, so you're normalizing murder, but all right.
Yeah.
But we need people on the other side where, okay, let's just say they did make that decision at one point in their life, but then they came and saw the light and saw, what's wrong with that. Those people need to be speaking out.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, I think that as a community, Christians, like, we need to have compassion for that story too. Story.
Absolutely. Actually, I was going to say that. I am pretty sure most Christians do. Yeah. So if you're a woman in crisis and you go to a church and like say, I need help, I don't think there's going to be anybody that's going to turn away you for help or for anything, finding you the resources that you need. I don't think that's going to be the case. And like, I follow Ali Stuckey on Instagram and stuff, and she's always posting like, for Amazon, like a baby registry, because she then gets it and then donates it to some like women's center, and she lives in Texas, but so somewhere there. And like, she says that like they get thousands of donations. So I mean, there's always something there for somebody.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So, I mean, even if it's something simple like, hey, I donated a box of diapers, like that helps somebody, because Lord knows we go through a lot of those. So, or, you can donate formula, or, I mean, anything helps. So, I mean, there's just so many resources out there. And then I guess my next thing would be, there's also so many resources to help you prevent from getting pregnant. So that's why I just don't understand the abortion argument in the year 2020 anyways.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think it's like you said, it's a matter of perceiving it as a right to be able to do, and also like living a lifestyle that leads up to it. I mean, like,
yeah, absolutely. And of course, like, nobody's perfect. We get that. But I mean, I don't know, just don't kill your baby.
Yeah, I know that. And now, I mean, like you said, when you're going through being a mom for the first time, when you were realizing just how much, as Ellis was growing in your womb, and then, it was just a totally different experience to understand.
Yes, to see it firsthand. Absolutely. And actually there is a, my husband just woke up my baby, speak of the devil. But no, there's a law somewhere, I don't remember what state it is. I want to say it's like Alabama or whatever, but they're now making it to be where you have to have an ultrasound before you get an abortion. And I think that's her. So like, you see firsthand this little life that's in you. Because I think a lot of people are okay with it because they just literally don't know.
Right.
So I think that's a great thing if they can use something to defer how many people. I'm sure that would change a lot of minds.
Absolutely. Well, and like, I mean, even the movie Juno, I love that part where the girl,
your
like,
baby has fingernails.
fingernails.
I know, and it's so funny because I'm pretty sure that movie is kind of meant to be a feminist thing, but in the end, they actually really just went for like a really pro-life thing.
Yeah, which is so cool. I mean, I thought that was really interesting because that girl was kind of painted as like a normal, like, Christian picketer, out of touch,
cartoonish view.
Yeah, but
no, totally. So all babies want to get born.
Yeah, all babies want to be born.
Baby has fingernails. I love that. I like that part.
Yeah.
But yeah, and so then the next thing, so kind of to piggy off that too, but the staying single and not getting married and never having a family is like kind of the feminist thing now too. So somehow getting married keeps you from achieving goals now.
Interesting. I mean, I think it's interesting how, I mean, of course, Paul talks about how, in a Christian framework, if you want to serve God without like being married, then, I mean, that's awesome, whatever. But being anti-family and anti-marriage I think is a different attitude to have, just on the whole, because I think now, like what we've talked about in a previous episode, the whole living together, like it just, I mean, I don't see the fulfillment. There's so much that you learn about God by being married, by having a family, and
and I mean, even how much you learn about yourself at that point too, and like how you can actually get closer to God by doing these things. I mean, it sounds crazy, but there's something glorifying about changing diapers, because like I mean, God created this, God gave this to me. I mean, this is a blessing, and not to mention how many women out there were probably killed to be in my position right now.
Right.
Women that can't get pregnant or whatever. So I just think, and then by staying single, I don't know, how many fulfilled single ladies do you know?
How many what?
I mean, how many truly fulfilled single women do you know?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of single women that I know still want to get married, even if they've, even if they've been single for a long time, they still kind of are holding out hope. Maybe.
Yeah, exactly. I think a lot of that's natural too. Like we, want to find a partner. And I think a lot of, it's funny that you say that I think a lot of feminists, they're trying to like fight that natural tendency to get married and even want to have a family. Like it's natural for women to be nurturing. That is one of the gifts that God did give us. So I think they're trying to fight that, but then at the same time, like they want to speak against it, but at the same time, deep down, they kind of want it.
Yeah. And I wonder why that is. And I wonder if it's because of the desire to have a career, or if it's just a desire to be so independent that you don't like need it, or I don't know. I mean,
I think it's a little of both. And then I think also too, feminism has made it to be where, oh, you're only a stay-at-home mom.
You're like, hey, what?
First of all, I probably can multitask better than you. Sometimes. But we've also just elevated having a career so much that now staying home to raise children is just like frowned upon. So I think with that being said, I think that's made women so much like, oh my gosh, I have to have this amazing career, and they have to, live in a cool chic apartment in the Upper West Side Manhattan, and that's the only way that I'm going to be happy. That's the only way that I'm going to be fulfilled and be successful, when success is sometimes even just something small.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it makes me think of where Jesus said that, if you give someone a cup of water in my name, my Father will not forget your reward in heaven. And I think that's totally. Like all motherhood. That's like 100% motherhood.
No, absolutely. No, that's a great one. And I think that's something that I think everybody out there that's just kind of like, I don't want to say, maybe struggling, but maybe thinking like, oh, am I doing the right thing? Or do I feel fulfilled? Like what? Remember that. And I think that is
absolutely
accurate.
Absolutely. And I think, we have you and I have our qualms with feminism just from how toxic it is. But I think the biggest thing is not that we dislike feminism. It's more that feminism causes you to miss out on this fulfillment of being proud and okay with all of the aspects of being a woman as God created us to be.
Yes, exactly. Like, of course, are we perfect? No. And we were created that way. But I mean, there is nothing like being able to carry a life in your womb. There is nothing like that than like amazing. I mean, I'm just using that as an example. Obviously, it's probably one of the biggest ones, but how much your body like just morphs. And like, I actually, again, when I had that awful thing called Twitter, I did see something positive there one time. But she said like, this woman, she said that she's carrying her baby, and the way that she tripped, and she was holding him, and she's like, the way that, you instinctively contort your body to like save the baby. I mean, it's just like something as simple as that. Like, it's amazing that what your instincts as a woman and as a mother can do.
Wow.
And I actually witnessed it myself. Like one time Ellis almost rolled off the bed, and like, I literally like dove. I mean, it was something like, I don't even know. I mean, it hurt really bad for me, but at the same time, I caught him before he rolled off. So I mean, it's so true. Like something that you don't even think, it just like happens.
It's just instinct.
Mm-hmm.
Well, like you were telling me in your second trimester, you just kept waking up, and it was your doctor said that it was just your body
Your
prepared.
body getting ready for being up all night. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's still kind of like that. Like, bless his heart, my husband snores and he's really loud. So sometimes I sleep on the couch because I'm like, I just want to get like an hour. But it's amazing that even then, like, I feel like I'm out in a totally separate room, but yet like something wakes me up when he's crying, the baby's crying. Like I can still, like, I don't know how to describe it. No, it's like your body's never permanently asleep, or it's not like fully asleep. You're just always kind of like in
You're
this.
always ready at the drop of a hat.
You're always ready. Yeah.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah. So I think that they're missing out. And like we talked about that Instagram food blogger that we follow, she had her plant babies. I'm like, okay, wow, there's so many things wrong with that.
I know.
That thought. So I just, but that's what feminism has taught, is that it's basically like dehumanized kids and babies, and just, it's
to where they're just objects, and they're
exactly, or like demon spawn is what my personal favorite. But I mean, just like the awful things that people say about children, and it's like, hey, you guys all realize you were a child once, right?
Right.
I mean, do we understand this?
Yeah, right.
And then everybody that says, oh, I'm never having kids, I'm like, come call me when you're 80 and takes care of you.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. There's so many benefits to.
Yeah, you get a best friend. I mean, it's a lot of work in the beginning, sure, but I mean, kind of once they get to be teenagers and then on up, they're really funny, and you get a best friend out of it.
Absolutely. Forever.
Totally. Yeah, exactly. So I guess like what we conclude about this whole thing is, yes, have there been good things about feminism? Absolutely. Like we said, voting, being able to get jobs, things like that. So of course that is a good thing, but then it's just taken a turn now where it's really toxic and it's not helpful. And then so feminism idolizes the self. We think that's a big one too. Sees yourself, it kind of like you see yourself as God, like everything is about me and it's important. So that also, I think, can also contribute to divorce. And then it denies the fact that God created man and women to complement each other.
Yep, it denies scripture for sure.
Yes. Oh, wow, I just clicked on something, my bad. And then it kind of creates this like men versus women thing that we know is not good either. It's not healthy, not to mention.
Right.
So you want to close us out?
Yeah, for sure. So the verse we have today is when God had created woman, when there was no suitable companion found for Adam in the Genesis story. And so he had caused Adam to go to sleep, and he took a rib out of Adam and then made woman, and then Adam woke up, and then the man said, this is at last bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called a woman because she was taken out of man. And just meditate on how beautiful of a thing that is, because this was everything to Adam at that point. And think about, I mean, how amazing it is that we get to have that kind of companionship and that complementary unity. So the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you and give you peace. We'll see you next time.